Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a huge question. I mean, it's so fundamental, it could really determine whether or not we survive the next few centuries.
It really is.
The question is, how do we fundamentally change the way humanity relates to the planet?
And this isn't just about, better technology or new treaties.
No, not at all. It's about a complete philosophical overhaul, right down at the deepest ideological level. We're diving into sources that argue our current crisis, this ecological upheaval that defines the Anthropocene, is rooted in a flawed worldview.
And the surprising, maybe even counterintuitive philosophical tool we need to fix it is gratitude.
Gratitude.
That's right. Our mission today is, well, it's pretty ambitious. We're exploring the philosophical role of gratitude as a genuine ideological alternative to that entrenched exploitative mindset that we see everywhere.
So we're analyzing how this concept, which, a lot of people just associate with self-help journals or...
We're saying thank you to grandma.
Right, exactly. How that can actually reform humanistic education and cultivate a profound, durable sense of ecological responsibility.
The urgency is just. It's undeniable. We're in the Anthropocene, an era where human activity is the dominant force shaping our planetary systems.
And that demands immediate action, of course. Political, technological action. We need to reduce emissions, protect biodiversity, find sustainable energy.
Of course.
But what the sources we're looking at really highlight is a crucial limitation in focusing only on those technical fixes.
It's the classic difference between treating the symptom and curing the disease.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine for a second we achieve this colossal global success tomorrow. We dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We stabilize the climate.
It's a huge win.
A monumental win.
Yeah.
But our sources point out that even that achievement would fail to address the underlying ideological reliance of modern Western economies on exploitation.
The reliance on exploiting natural resources.
And often human beings.
Yeah.
That part doesn't go away. The mindset is still there.
So the infrastructure might change, but the way we think stays the same. The attitude that views the world as this infinite passive set of resources for endless extraction that remains totally intact.
Exactly. It's just waiting to express itself in new exploitative ways down the line.
Mm-hmm.
If we want long-term lasting sustainability, we have to instigate these really fundamental changes in people's outlook on life.
In what they value, how they feel.
And how they define their relationship to the natural world. Otherwise, any structural changes we make will eventually be undermined by this persistent exploitative ideology that just sees the world as an instrument for human gain.
And this leads directly to a genuinely disturbing question the authors pose, especially for those of us who really value human flourishing. Does viewing the world primarily as resources inevitably diminish one's own potential for flourishing?
It's a profound thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
If human flourishing is partly made up of having meaningful relationships you experience as intrinsically valuable.
Relationships rooted in things like awe or appreciation, reciprocity.
Exactly. If that's true, then an objectifying, purely instrumental attitude fundamentally limits your human potential. The world just becomes flat, predictable, and ultimately less meaningful.
That is a stark realization. The example they use is so poignant. Even when we talk about something positive like sustainability education, we might risk impoverishing the student.
How so?
While we teach them to view a forest or a tree strictly as a CO2 carrier or a carbon sink or a timber resource, we displace that initial sense of awe, that wonder you might have felt for that tree as a living, valuable thing in itself.
You've turned a majesty into a metric.
Perfectly put. A majesty into a metric.
And if you reduce the tree to a metric, you diminish the student's capacity to have a rich, complex, non-exploitative relationship with that tree. So the central question for this deep dive becomes,
what desirable way of relating to the world can replace this exploitative model, and how can education foster it?
And the argument we're investigating suggests the answer lies entirely in the contribution of gratitude.
Okay, let's start by situating ourselves in the current moment. We keep using the term Anthropocene, which is, it's descriptive, but we need to understand the specific ideological engine driving the destructive parts of this era.
Exactly. I mean, the Anthropocene is defined geologically by the fact that the cumulative impacts of human activity now rank alongside other planetary scale forces. We're influencing the climate, nutrient cycles.
But the moral and philosophical discussion has to shift away from just sort of abstractly blaming humanity.
Right. It's not about humanity as a whole being guilty. It's about specific harmful ways of relating to the world.
Ways that were developed by certain human populations, historically, the modern Western cultures that industrialized first.
Precisely. We need to focus on the exploitative ways, which are underpinned by this instrumentalizing outlook, where the world is perceived mainly in terms of controllable, instrumentally valuable resources.
And this brings us to the core philosophical driver. The sources call it the metaphysics of mastery.
The metaphysics of mastery.
That phrase sounds heavy. What exactly does it encapsulate?
It describes a deeply anthropocentric and manipulative way of relating to everything outside the self. This mentality, it gained particular potency with the rise of modernist humanism, which itself was derived from specific readings of Enlightenment thinking.
And the core tenet is
The predominance of the assertion and satisfaction of the human will. It's not just using the world for survival. It's the belief that the natural world is fundamentally a collection of inert objects just waiting to be controlled, manipulated, used, and consumed according to our desires.
I think we need to slow down on this idea of mastery because it really does underpin the entire crisis. The authors break down the resulting damage into 3 distinct harms. Let's make sure we detail each one.
Okay. The first harm is the one that, generates the headlines: environmental disasters.
Right.
If your philosophical starting point is mastery and short-term utility, that the world is yours to command, you become fundamentally blind to long-term accumulating negative side effects.
You only see the immediate benefit of, say, burning fossil fuels or clear-cutting a forest.
And you fail to calculate the devastating long-term costs of destabilizing the entire planetary system. And that has consequences that are detrimental to everyone's flourishing.
Okay, so that's harm number 1. The second harm expands the scope beyond just environmental systems to how we treat other entities.
Both human and non-human.
Right.
That's harm number 2, what they call resource treatment. The metaphysics of mastery dictates that anything can be treated merely as an input to human systems.
Which undermines the flourishing of humans, animals, ecosystems.
Everything. Think about modern slavery. It treats a human being as a resource input, a means to an end. It strips them of dignity and intrinsic value.
And intensive livestock farming does something similar to animals.
Exactly. It treats sentient animals merely as disposable protein production units, ignoring their capacity for suffering or any intrinsic worth.
So, treating a human being or a cow as a resource stems from the same deep-seated ideology of mastery. But the third harm is the one that really drives the argument for gratitude, because it's internal.
Yes. The third harm is the most insidious. Impoverished relationships. If you habitually reduce the world, including other people, plants, ecosystems, to useful resources, you diminish the quality and richness of your connection to them.
It's a self-inflicted wound.
It is. The sources argue that our own well-being is constituted by these rich, intrinsically valuable relationships. If all your relationships are instrumental, I'm only interacting with this person or this forest because of what it can do for me, then that mindset fundamentally undermines your own potential for a meaningful existence.
By asserting total mastery, we isolate ourselves and lose access to the richness that comes from interdependence.
And that brings us back to the educational challenge. If the first 2 harms can be addressed by technology and policy, clean energy, stronger animal rights laws, the third harm requires a deeper educational solution.
It's the foundation.
It has to be. We need to improve the quality of our relationship with the world, because success in technology and policy depends entirely on it. We must care about the natural world, seeing its intrinsic value, before we can effectively care for it through regulations or engineering.
And this demands fostering what the sources call the receptive modality.
Yes. Humanistic education has to find ways to break the iron grip of anthropocentrism and the metaphysics of mastery. We need to encourage receptive and responsive modes of perception.
A kind of attentiveness that isn't focused on immediate control or manipulation.
Right. This attentiveness has to be open. It has to be effective, emotional, as well as cerebral. It needs to foster what they call systemic wisdom.
Tell us more about systemic wisdom.
It's the wisdom you achieve through participation, through experiencing yourself as embedded within these fluid, reciprocal relationships that constitute nature. It's totally different from spectatorial causal engagement.
Where you stand apart from nature and analyze it scientifically just to figure out how to pull the levers?
Exactly. The receptive modality is about sensing the interconnectedness, which requires emotion and feeling, not just intellect.
And this leads to the scathing critique of modern education itself, the idea that education has contributed to the very crisis it's trying to solve, the Educocene.
It's a powerful, self-critical viewpoint. Some scholars argue that modern education, even when teaching environmental topics, often remains rooted in that resource mindset. We're still primarily shaping people to perceive the world in terms of inputs and outputs, utility, measurable gain.
I think David Orr critiqued this by saying modern education alienates us from life in the name of human domination.
And crucially, it separates feeling from intellect.
That separation is the key bridge to gratitude. If it's not half so important to know as to feel, as Rachel Carson famously put it, then the shift we need is emotional. It requires cultivating a capacity for wonder.
Exactly. The metaphysics of mastery thrives on predictability and control. The receptive modality thrives on wonder and feeling, which introduce contingency and intrinsic value. So if our goal is to move past the exploitative mindset, we have to find an emotional disposition that can replace it.
And the argument is that gratitude is uniquely equipped for this task.
It is.
Okay, so let's unpack this central claim. If gratitude is the key ideological alternative, we have to define it philosophically, especially since we're applying it to non-personal entities like the Earth or the entire web of existence.
Right. We're not talking about thanking an intentional giver here,
So we have to move beyond the common definition.
which is triadic gratitude. This involves three necessary components: a beneficiary, that's you, a benefit, the gift, and an intentional benefactor, the person who chose to give it.
And since the Earth is not an intentional benefactor, triadic gratitude really limits our moral and emotional capacity to appreciate nature.
It does. So the sources make the case for a different, richer understanding. Dyadic gratitude.
Dyadic gratitude.
Yes. This view argues that gratitude is rational and meaningful, even without an intentional giver. It focuses on the phenomenology of the experience, the specific experiential elements that characterize true appreciation, rather than the source of the gift.
So we shift from needing someone to thank to appreciating the phenomenon of the gift itself.
That's the move.
So what defines this metaphorical gift in a secular dyadic sense? What are the specific characteristics that trigger this emotional and motivational response?
There are three critical characteristics. The first is its gratuitous nature.
Gratuitous, meaning it's not earned or required.
Correct. The good is contingent. It might just as well not have been available to us. It's unearned, and critically, it's uncontrollable.
Uncontrollable.
Think about the conditions that allow life on Earth: the perfect orbital path, the precise composition of the atmosphere, the presence of liquid water. These are radically contingent and utterly beyond our control. Gratitude makes us aware that the things upholding our lives cannot be understood solely as our own achievement.
They depend on forces beyond our complete mastery.
Exactly. And that directly challenges the ideology of mastery we just discussed. Mastery says, I control this. Gratitude says, this was given.
Which leads to the second characteristic.
Interdependency. Gratitude involves the acknowledgement of our dependency, or perhaps our radical interdependency, on something other, or something much larger than ourselves. It punctures the illusion of the autonomous, isolated self that's so championed by modernist individualism.
You realize you're not a solitary agent, but an embedded part of a fragile system.
And the third element is what prevents it from being just, passive appreciation or gladness.
Yeah.
It has to have a motivational impetus.
Right.
Gratitude isn't just a pleasant feeling. It carries a desire to cherish, celebrate, and promote the good in our lives. If you are grateful for the gift of a clean river, the motivational impetus is the commitment to protect that river.
That's the kinetic energy that translates feeling into moral action.
Which is absolutely vital for the ecological responsibility demanded by the Anthropocene. It ensures the feeling isn't fleeting.
So this framework allows for the rationality of secular existential gratitude. I don't need to believe in a divine giver to feel grateful for the contingent fact of my existence.
It's entirely rational. If you acknowledge that your opportunities to flourish are dependent on a contingent, unearned, and uncontrollable good, the favorable conditions on Earth, then interpreting those conditions as a metaphorical gift and feeling motivated to cherish and protect that precious fragility.
Yeah.
That's a logical, coherent response. It doesn't require personification or irrationality.
This sounds incredibly powerful for education. It moves way beyond teaching mere facts about ecosystems.
It does, because people factually know they depend on Earth. Every student knows this. But gratitude experiences have the potential to deepen and emotionally charge that existing understanding.
It fuels the knowledge with the motivational force and commitment that was previously lacking.
Knowledge plus gratitude equals responsibility.
Okay, I have to raise the critical philosophical concern here, the one the sources grapple with. It's the resource trap. Does gratitude truly overcome the view of nature as merely a resource? Or does it simply make us better resource managers?
This is the critical juncture,
Yeah.
and it's a necessary check on the argument. It's a really important question. If gratitude simply makes us realize the high economic value and fragility of natural resources, say clean water or a stable climate, it might only motivate us to manage them carefully, efficiently, and sustainably.
So we become better stewards, but the underlying instrumental view remains. Nature serves man.
Precisely. Stewardship without intrinsic appreciation is just enlightened self-interest.
Right.
So the deeper philosophical question remains. Can gratitude reshape our ontological ethical view of what it means to be human? Does it move us from management to genuine appreciation of intrinsic value, seeing the world as inherently valuable, not just valuable to us? That's what we need to explore next.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To move beyond that resource trap, we need to visualize the ontological shift. The sources provide this really lyrical scenario of existential gratitude in the natural world. Let's use this anecdote to analyze the mechanism of change.
Yeah, that detailed anecdote is crucial because it tracks the cognitive and emotional progression. It starts with a person walking through a forest, experiencing genuine awe. The light beams, the bird song, this is the receptive modality in action.
But immediately, the modern context intrudes.
It does. The person notices signs of drought, remembers the news about climate change, and the feeling shifts to fear. Catastrophic loss, fire, the potential end of this beauty.
So the initial wonder is contaminated by the awareness of fragility, vulnerability, and the potential disaster we ourselves have created.
And that anxiety threatens to completely overwhelm the appreciation. But then an interruptive moment occurs. The subtle sound of the breeze, the rustling of leaves, pulls the person back to the present.
A reawakening.
A reawakening. And coupled with the sense of awe, it generates this profound surge of gratitude. The person sees the forest and the opportunity to connect with it not as a resource, but as a precious, undeserved gift that is enriching their life right now.
And this isn't passive appreciation. It immediately links back to that motivational impetus we talked about.
It does. The feeling motivates protection and celebration, but the experience continues to expand. The gratitude shifts its focus from the specific forest to the planet as a whole, the immense, intricate web of interdependent forces that allow this forest and this life to exist.
The realization hits home.
Life depends on a fragile balance of numerous uncontrollable forces. The internal conclusion isn't scientific, it's existential. What a gift to be a part of this beautiful planet and to be able to explore some of his numerous mysteries.
This allows us to formally analyze the resulting relational change. When someone experiences this kind of existential gratitude, what specifically changes in their relationship to the natural world?
Well, first, the object changes. The forest or the earth are no longer perceived primarily as a means to instrumental benefits, even though those benefits clearly exist. They're seen as beautiful, intrinsically valuable entities one feels profoundly connected with.
The shift is from utility to ontology.
It is from what is this good for to this is good in itself.
And what happens to the self in this experience?
The self moves from being a passive recipient, someone who is lucky enough to enjoy nature's beauty, to being an active participant. They commit to a reciprocal relationship, adopting a caring role, taking responsibility as an earth inhabitant.
So there's an identity alteration.
Yes, the felt connectedness is so profound that it involves at least a momentary identity alteration. You realize you are not merely visiting Earth, you are a part of the larger interdependent whole, not an isolated master standing above it.
And this identity change is key to reforming the concept of human flourishing.
Absolutely. Existential gratitude fosters relationships characterized by something akin to love. And relationships rooted in love, in appreciation of intrinsic value, contribute a richness and meaningfulness that exploitative instrumental relations simply cannot provide.
Plus, when you genuinely love something, your own flourishing becomes intrinsically bound up with the flourishing of that thing.
That's it. You don't stop caring for a partner or a child just because they stop being immediately useful to you. Gratitude provides meaning by binding us emotionally and morally to the world. It deepens identity and infuses life with a genuine sense of moral responsibility to care for the ecosystems we are part of.
And this intrinsic motivation to care is the most powerful antidote to the exploitative modes of being characteristic of the Anthropocene.
Where the natural world is construed primarily in terms of resources.
Yes, we've established the incredible power and necessity of existential gratitude. Now we hit the wall. Why is this state of being, this disposition of gratitude toward the natural world, so incredibly difficult to maintain in modern Western societies?
We have to confront the core ideological tension. Existential gratitude presupposes dependency, contingency, and vulnerability. The modern Western worldview is aggressively built upon the opposing pillars: radical autonomy, absolute control, and meticulous calculation.
So this conflict means that sustained existential gratitude is incredibly difficult to hold as a disposition.
It tends to remain just a fleeting, interruptive experience.
Let's delve into those pillars, starting with the philosophical tension of calculation. The sources use Bono's point about the rationalization of the world, this idea that everything has its price and value can be measured, leaving no room for a gift.
This is best understood through sociologist Max Weber's concept of the disenchantment of the world.
Die Entzauberung der Welt.
Exactly. Disenchantment doesn't mean we know everything factually. Modern life relies on incredibly complex technologies most of us don't understand at all. What Weber meant was the faith, the ideological belief that, in principle, one could calculate and understand the mechanism of everything.
And that one could eventually control all things by calculation.
Right. And that faith in control is the direct antagonist to gratitude, which requires acknowledging contingency. Gratitude requires a deeply felt awareness of dependency. The modern sense of technological and intellectual control completely obscures this fact.
Our success through modern science has resulted in this mentality of being apart from nature and in control of it.
Yes, and this worldview presents the human identity as radically unique and only minimally connected to the Earth, making the acceptance of interdependence feel almost revolutionary or even retrogressive.
And this sense of separation is deeply rooted in the philosophical tradition, stemming from figures like Descartes and Kant.
Absolutely. The tension traces back to Cartesian doubt, which placed humanity in this splendid isolation. By requiring the individual to start from the primary indubitable fact of doubting and thinking, cogito, ergo sum Descartes, philosophically alienated man from nature.
And then Kantian autonomy takes that isolation and elevates it into a principle of moral domination.
This is the high point of modernist humanism. Human dignity is derived from reason and autonomy, the moral law we give ourselves. Kant framed the Enlightenment as emergence from self-incurred tutelage, a liberation. But this ideal of rational control was applied equally to nature.
I remember that quote. He described reason approaching nature not like a pupil who listens, but
like an appointed judge who compels witnesses to answer the questions he puts to them.
that metaphor of the appointed judge perfectly captures the metaphysics of mastery. We're not listening to nature, we're demanding answers from it so we can command it.
It frames the human task as extracting knowledge purely for the sake of domination and control over a passive, mechanism-driven world. And this mindset is just fundamentally inhospitable to existential gratitude. It foregrounds uniqueness, self-legislation, and control rather than embeddedness and dependency.
And when you combine the disenchantment with this radical autonomy, the result is the problem of entitlement.
That's the normative consequence. If we believe we are the masters, the appointed judges, and everything is calculable, the implicit worldview is one of powerful entitlement. The earth is simply there for us to exploit, to serve our needs and desires.
We feel we deserve the resources.
Rather than recognizing them as contingent gifts, this entitlement underpins the entire metaphysics of mastery.
And the forces of modern consumption act as a massive accelerator for this entitlement.
Oh, absolutely. Modern capitalist societies have perfected the art of meeting needs and, crucially, transforming people into consumers. Consumerism relies on the promise that all desires can be fulfilled through consumption, fostering the idea that goods are perpetually available on demand.
And this systemic availability actively diminishes appreciation and contingency.
Of course. If you can get it instantly with a click, it doesn't feel like a contingent, fragile gift. It feels like a right.
I find the final paradox here fascinating. Even the practice of gratitude is often commodified.
It's the ultimate irony. Drawing on positive psychology research, gratitude is frequently marketed as a self-help consumption. Goodbye this guyery, follow these steps, and you will achieve personal happiness. The pursuit becomes an instrumental, goal-oriented tool for personal benefit.
But genuine gratitude, the existential, transformative kind, requires an open, receptive mode of attentiveness.
One that foregrounds contingency and dependence on the gift. When we pursue gratitude solely as a tool for self-mastery, that controlling, goal-oriented focus actively hinders the genuine, receptive experience of gratitude we are trying to foster.
So the very foundations of the modern Western worldview, rationalism, individualism, a focus on radical, dominating autonomy, they are deeply antithetical to existential gratitude.
They are?
Since humanism is tied to these foundations, we have to ask, Can it ever embrace existential gratitude and shed the metaphysics of mastery? Is humanism itself salvageable?
That is the central fight. Environmental theorists have historically targeted humanism as being responsible for the crisis. But the sources argue that humanism contains within it the seeds of its own critique.
How so?
Well, there's an important overlap. Both humanist and environmentalist critiques often seek to preserve their supreme concerns, humanitas and freedom, or nature and biodiversity, from objectification and commodification within the modern economic apparatus. They both resist the utilitarian mandate that everything must justify its existence functionally.
But the stickiest issue remains the humanist ideal of freedom, which critics say absolves us from obligations to non-human nature.
We must reinterpret freedom. Critics often conflate Kantian dualism, separating the realm of freedom from the realm of nature, with the idea that nature is irrelevant. But in fact, that dualism in its historical context was an attempt to rescue humanity and ethics from purely mechanistic worldviews. It was trying to preserve a space for moral responsibility.
Which is the bedrock of any environmental ethic.
It is.
Right.
Freedom does not have to be defined as control over nature.
So how do we articulate a richer, more responsible definition of freedom?
The sources turn to the work of philosopher Charles Taylor, who argues that self-determining freedom requires much more than just the ability to make choices. It fundamentally requires a self-transcendent horizon of significance.
What does a horizon of significance look like in practice?
It's the background of intelligibility, the context, that allows us to make meaningful choices, define our identity, and differentiate between what is truly significant and what is trivial. If your life is just a series of random choices without this horizon, your freedom becomes meaningless.
And Taylor shows these horizons are often tied to meaningful external relationships.
Relationships that are given to us and are not entirely created by the isolated self. And this is the crucial link to gratitude.
Yeah.
Freedom, understood this way, is not at odds with acknowledging dependency. Gratitude helps us articulate these horizons. It grounds freedom in responsibility. It transforms freedom from a license to dominate into an invitation to exercise responsible choice within the context of the interdependent relationships that sustain our lives.
The free choice becomes, how do I care for this contingent gift?
Exactly. And this reframing allows us to move beyond anthropocentrism without abandoning the core humanistic concern for flourishing.
Historically, humanism has used language of human dignity that implies species superiority.
And contemporary humanists are rightly criticized for this, if it leads to disrespect for the non-human world. The shift underway is moving the focus from human centrality to human responsibility. This responsibility is extended not just to fellow humans, but to other animals and the earth itself.
But the overall goal of humanistic education is still human flourishing. Can that survive the anti-anthropocentric critique?
It can, but it has to evolve. Hardline anthropocentric interpretations are rejected. Human flourishing must be understood as facilitated and constituted by rich relationships with the non-human world, recognizing nature's intrinsic value. The sources suggest that while humanism might retain a special regard for human traits like moral responsibility, it must transcend the aim of exclusively promoting human flourishing.
So the goal is a necessary transcendence of that modernist humanism.
A form of humanism is conceivable that fully abandons normative anthropocentrism. This doesn't mean we stop being human. Rather, it's a move that allows us to be more human through participating in the gift of the given.
And that's the ultimate synthesis. Gratitude is the essential practice for facilitating that participation and defining a new, responsible human identity in the Anthropocene.
Yes.
So, if existential gratitude is the aim, the necessary disposition, and we've established that the modern world is actively hostile to its requirements of receptivity and dependency, what practical steps can humanistic education take? What actually interrupts the relentless push toward the metaphysics of mastery?
Well, the challenge lies in creating cracks in that wall of control, calculation, and availability on demand. The sources propose cultivating two powerfully interruptive experiences: wonder and awe.
These are not feelings you choose. They choose you, right?
Precisely. They are receptive modes of consciousness that we are often thrown into, disrupting our ordinary utilitarian perception of the world. They interrupt the habitual loop of calculation.
They stop us from being the appointed judge and force us back into the role of the pupil.
That's a great way to put it. Let's define wonder in this context. Wonder is characterized by an open, receptive mode of attentiveness. It is essentially other-acknowledging.
So when we wonder, we acknowledge uncontrollability, contingency, vulnerability.
Yes. The object of wonder, be it a star, a complex ecosystem, or a single snowflake, is something that we cannot fully predict or control. It realizes the experiential ingredients required to open up and receive the goods provided by the natural world as gifts.
And awe seems to be a more intense, self-transcendent version of that experience.
It is. Awe is self-transcendent because it connects us with a greater whole that is experienced as truly great in a normative sense, often ineffable and much larger than our individual self. Because it involves this connection to a greater system, the whole planet, the cosmos, the link between awe and perceiving nature's intrinsic value is immediate and direct.
It makes the individual feel smaller, but in a meaningful way, realizing their place within the whole.
Exactly.
So I understand the connection. Wonder and awe are precursors to gratitude. They break the perception of control.
They create the necessary receptive space. By interrupting the common mastery-tainted modes of experience, they make us receptive to the intrinsic value of the natural world, preparing the ground for existential gratitude. If we don't allow these moments of interruption, the calculated utilitarian worldview just rushes back in.
But the sources stress that gratitude is the crucial final step beyond these interruptive states.
That's the normative step. Wonder and awe are fundamentally object-centered. They focus on the object's value, its complexity, its mystery. Gratitude, however, integrates these relationships into one's sense of identity and conception of flourishing.
It connects the self to the gift.
And it crystallizes a moral responsibility toward it. It transforms the experience from, wow, that is complex, to, wow, I am a part of this complex system and I must protect it.
So the educational proposal is to actively cultivate environments where wonder and awe can penetrate the student's mind, even if the surrounding modern world is trying to extinguish those feelings.
That is the immense challenge.
Yeah.
We have to recognize that the modern Western education system, with its focus on measurable results, standardization, and utility, is often a hostile environment for wonder and awe.
We teach subjects to be useful rather than inherently valuable or mysterious. We prioritize mastery over mystery.
Right, so humanistic education has to consciously slow down and emphasize experiences of reception. This means curriculum changes that prioritize field experiences, aesthetic engagement with nature, and time for contemplative reflection.
We need to encourage students to spend time with phenomena that defy easy measurement or calculation.
Exactly. For instance, studying a complex ecosystem, not just for its trophic levels, but for its sheer bewildering complexity and beauty. Teaching geology not just as resource extraction, but as the deep time story of the contingent emergence of life. It's about creating moments where the mystery of the world will inevitably penetrate the rational mind,
Heightening our susceptibility to intrinsic value.
and thereby opening up space for true, transformative gratitude experiences. That transformation is the only ideological route to long-term sustainability. It is a fundamental shift from viewing ourselves as isolated, self-determining masters to embedded, morally responsible inhabitants, grateful for the gift of life and the conditions that allow it.
We've reached the end of this deep dive. Our journey started by recognizing that the Anthropocene crisis is fundamentally ideological, rooted in the metaphysics of mastery. This philosophy, underpinned by Western rationalism's emphasis on control and radical autonomy, has impoverished both our planet and our capacity for rich human flourishing.
And we proposed existential gratitude, a dyadic recognition of the contingent, unearned gift of life and the intricate web of interdependence as the crucial ideological shift required. We analyzed how this necessitates challenging the core tenets of control and moving toward a framework where freedom is defined not as domination, but as responsible choice within a given horizon of significance.
The ultimate goal of fostering this gratitude is clear. It sensitizes us to our vulnerability, it deepens relationships with the natural world beyond mere instrumentality, and it supports a genuine sense of moral responsibility to care for the world we inhabit. It transforms the autonomous self into the grateful participant.
And if the modern world constantly teaches us control, calculation, and consumption on demand, we must actively and intentionally resist these forces by creating space for those interruptive experiences of wonder and awe.
And so we leave you with this final provocative thought. If the ultimate expression of existential gratitude is a sense of binding moral responsibility, and if that responsibility is grounded in recognizing the contingent, fragile gift of life, what immediate action does that realization demand of you today? Not tomorrow and not next year, but right now, in the face of the ongoing ecological crisis.